In this episode, what's in a name? Why your favorite architect isn't who you think. Welcome to Two Architects and a Lawyer. Join architect Luis de Miguel in Valencia and architect lawyer William McLean in Vancouver for observations and commentary on all things design. William is away. Here is Luis.
Well, good morning, William. I'll begin this little chat quoting one of your namesakes, namely William Shakespeare, who said, "What's in a name, and would a rose be any sweeter by any other name?" In English, you have this thing called the given name, which in most other countries is called first name. And so it really is the one thing that your parents do give you is your first name. So with that in mind, turns out that almost many famous architects changed their names in different ways. And like everything, I like to start at the beginning. And the first architect of record was a guy named Imhotep, who lived in Egypt, of course, around 2700, let's say, BC, of course. And he lived to be 80 years, by the way. And he was the architect of record for a building called the Saqqara Pyramid, which I think we've shown in other chapters of our little chats. It's a sort of escalated shaped pyramid. It's not the smooth limestone. And it just so happens that through our discussion about whether the pyramids were architecture or not, our friend Louis Kahn said that just placing a stone on the desert was an architectural gesture. Therefore, placing many stones on the desert floor, clearly, to him anyway, it was also an act of architecture. The first sort of Greek guy who called himself an architect was Theodore of Samos, who lived between the 7th and the 6th century BC. And he was from a small place called Samos. Just as an aside to Theodore of Samos, he not only was an architect, but he actually developed the level, the set square. He also invented deodorant and keys for locking up things. So all around, pretty clever guy. The two well-known architects of the Parthenon were Ictinus and Callicrates, perhaps. I wonder how many architects today know of these people. So, of course, we have Donato di Pascuccio d'Antonio, back in 1444, better known as Bramante. And Bramante is another name for a hemp rope type decoration. Leonardo was actually Leonardo di Ser Piero, because he was the illegitimate son of a notary, Ser Piero. And so anyway, he eventually changed it to just Leonardo da Vinci. In Montreal, he was known as Leonardo de Vinci. Then you have a guy named Michelangelo di Ludovico Buonarroti Simoni, who was, in 1475, born in a really small town called Caprese, now called Caprese di Michelangelo. And of course, I'm talking about Michelangelo Buonarroti, beyond architecture. I mean, here's a guy that really, he could really hold his nuts. So anyway, then you have Andrea Palladio, which is a beautiful name, frankly, for an architect to be named Andrea Palladio, except that he made that up because he was really Andrea di Pietro della Gondola. Now, I'm just venturing out here why perhaps he was called della Gondola, those famous boats in Venice. There's an expression during the war. Well, actually, it was even before. It was an expression in the British Navy. It's not very nice. It was called "son of a gun," and things went on ships and so on. And "son of a gun" became the name of people whose ancestry was a bit in doubt, as it were. And I'm not sure this. I'm making this up. Whether Della Gondola was part of that, but it could be. We go through the whole Renaissance, and there was a guy named Francois Mansart, A.R.T., who became famous around 1600 because he designed a roof. Now, I don't know if this had to do with zoning. I'm not sure that in 1600 there was a lot of zoning, but there must have been something. And he devised a roof that had two slopes, flood front, and it projected out of the main roof, as it were. And that provided small accommodation at the very top of buildings. So he added, as it were, living quarters under the main roof, as it were. And he became quite famous because of that. Of course, the name, he didn't change it, but the name of the roof changed to Mansarde with a D as opposed to Mansart. Anyway, so that was that. And he had a grandnephew, Jules Hardouin Mansart, and this guy was the architect of, among other things, the Hôtel des Invalides in Paris. So, and then we go through a period of where either the names change very little or we just don't know. But it seems to be like between that and, say, late 1800s, pretty much people kept their names. But not only architects, but there was a guy named Romain de Tirteuf, and he changed his name to Herté. And this guy was born in 1892 in Russia, so Herté was quite famous. And Herté, just as an aside, in Spain in the last 40 years, let's say, Herté means sort of a labor status, that you're temporarily out of work, not permanently. So, and you still collect some money and so on. A kind of unemployment insurance. Just, by the way, this guy Herté lived to be 98 years old, and many architects seem to live for a long time. Of course, then we come to the big cheese here, Ludwig. Well, it was actually Maria Michael Ludwig Mies, and the son of a stonemason. And he when he started working for architects and so on, he thought he better change his name a little, make him more aristocratic, and he added his mother's last name with the a sort of a Dutch proviso. Mother's last name was Rowe, and he added the Van der Rohe. So he became Ludwig Mies van der Rohe, and he, most people just refer to him as Mies. And he came up with that phrase of less is more, less is more. So some clever person, I don't know if it was in the School of Architecture, but I heard the name Lester Moore as a way to referring to Mr. Van der Rohe. He was born in 1886, by the way. Well, perhaps the most famous architect in the world, and considered by many the best architect of all time, was Frank Lloyd Wright, and he was born Frank Lloyd Wright, period, and he didn't have to add or subtract anything. He was the first Frank, really. I was surprised to learn he was born in 1867. I mean, that's anyhow. He also lived an extremely long life. There was a famous guy named the Crow, and the Crow may not mean anything to you, but it's actually in French. It's Corbusier. So he decided that was his name. His name really was Le Corbusier, not just a crow, but the crow. And his real name was Charles Édouard Jeanneret, whose brother was a builder, and they often worked together. Now, 1901 saw the birth of Louis Kahn in Estonia. Now, in Estonia, you don't meet a lot of Kahns, and Louis is no exception. His birth name was Itzelieb Shimuilus. So you can understand why he thought perhaps shortening the name and changing it altogether was a good idea. And the other Frank that comes to mind, born in 1929 and also lived practically to 100, born in Toronto, in Canada, Toronto. And his actual name was Ephraim Owen Goldberg. And his wife at one point suggested that he should change his name because there was a lot of backlash, a lot of anti-Semitism at the time, and so on. So he changed his name to Frank Gehry and gave us many amazing buildings, really. And of course, last but not least, not real name change, but something called ARCOP was quite famous in Montreal. And in fact, we used to call it sixth year architecture because many of the McGill graduates ended up working at ARCOP. And ARCOP stood for Architects in Co-Partnership. And the firm, just for the record, was Affleck, Deborah, Dimokopoulos, Lebensold, and Seiss. So that's a mouthful. So ARCOP was a good idea, but it was, I think it was one of the first firms that had a kind of a corporate name. There was Archie Graham in Britain, and I can't think of anything else. Now, of course, there's Big. Anyway, there's a number of. I mean, IMPay was Aio Meo Pay, so not much change there, except he changed it. He added the word partners, and then he added the name of Harry Copp. And again, tying it to Montreal, they produced Place Ville-Marie, still the most beautiful skyscraper in Montreal. And the local firm just happened to be Park Hub. So there we are, full circle. I'll see you soon and talk with you, hopefully, also soon.